Joe's shop recently sent me a big box of goodies. Brian McGuire and his wife made some cool embroidered items for Joe. I think I look pretty good in the shirt and ball cap. Mrs. Magdad loves the tote bag. And Chuck has convinced himself that the beanie fits. He claims it'll keep him nice and warm this winter and he won't have to fly south. Along with the cool swag, Joe sent me a couple old tools that came out of his grandfather's shop. Joe knows I like steel, wood, and brass. The maker's mark was faint. This poor little saw had its share of patina. I soaked the saw and the metal pieces from the sliding T-bevel in evaporust overnight. I still wasn't able to read the maker's mark. The evaporust did an amazing job on the saw. The adjustment wheel had totally freed up. I cleaned up the saw hardware on the wire wheel. I also went over the cast handle. There was a couple of spots on the handle that I wanted to improve with a file. I whacked the kinks out of the blade with the help of my tiny anvil. I didn't get it perfectly straight, but it was definitely better than when I started. I rounded over the tip of the blade and did a quick sharpening job on the teeth. I tested the little saw on a piece of scrap pine. I didn't have the blade locked down tight enough at first. Not exactly a hot knife through butter, but the old saw did the job. I decided to heat blue the saw hardware. I heated the parts until they darkened and then dunked them into canola oil. I'm sure any oil would suffice. I used my table saw as a flat surface to sand the stock of the sliding T-bevel. Here's the stock after sanding with 150 grit. I used the stirring sticks to stabilize the blade slit while I was sanding. To clean up the screw heads, I used a wire brush that I modified with some heat shrink tubing to concentrate the wires. After sanding down to 220 grit, I switched to fine steel wool, then superfine steel wool. I used a paper towel to collect all of the steel wool dust I made. Looking good, Magdad. Chuck loves to supervise the flitzing. Chuck wanted to hang out some more while I waxed the stock. Can you see yourself, Chuck? The hardware was going to need some work to match how nicely the stock turned out. I removed the casting marks with a file. I used my hand drill and belt sander to smooth out the head of the carriage bolt. I polished the parts on the fiber wheel. I think the fiber wheel left a nice finish. I heat blued the sliding T-bevel hardware the same way I did the saw hardware. I sanded the blade by hand to try to sneak up on the maker's mark. Some of it was worn away. Sometimes I can make the marking more visible if I fill in the area with Sharpie and then lightly sand with 600 grit. I was now able to read enough of the marking to identify it. I sanded the blade down to 240 grit and then polished it with the fiber wheel. I used a piece of scrap wood to stabilize the blade. I applied Birchwood Casey's Super Blue to both blades. Sometimes the bluing goes on a little blotchy. I found that I can even the color out with superfine steel wool. I then degreased and recoated. I think I put 4 coats on the T-bevel blade. Here's what the 2 items looked like the day I got them in the mail. I think they both came out nice. I painted the saw handle with that Rust-Oleum moss green that I picked up at a yard sale recently. Let me know what you think of the color in the comments. I think the blued steel parts on the sliding T-bevel contrast nicely with the polished brass and waxed wood. The maker's mark is the Bluegrass brand, sold by Belknap Hardware out of Louisville, Kentucky. Belknap Hardware began in 1840 and stayed in business until 1986. They were a competitor to Sears Roebuck, and their Bluegrass brand tools were similar to the Sears Craftsman line. Although I couldn't find a maker's mark on the saw, I did find what appears to be the same saw in a 1918 Disston catalog. Thanks again to Joe's shop for the cool swag and a couple gems from Grandpa's workshop. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Recently, I reached 5,000 subscribers. I want to say thank you to every subscriber. I'm amazed and a little overwhelmed that so many people enjoy watching me and Chuck fool around in our little shop.